They said no one could survive that crash. But 6 days later, deep in the Montana wilderness, we found her, alive. Next to her lay a German shepherd, covered in blood, standing guard as if protecting something sacred. No one knew how he had dragged her through fire, through freezing rain, through the storm that nearly took both their lives. Some called it instinct, but to me, it was something greater. A miracle written by God's own hand. What happened next would reveal a secret buried for years, one that would test the boundaries of love, faith, and what it truly means to be family. Stay with me until the end of this story, because it's not just about survival. It's about grace, redemption, and the way heaven sometimes speaks through those who cannot talk. If you believe miracles still exist, please subscribe, share this story, and help us spread faith, hope, and compassion to the world. Thank you for being here, and may God bless you wherever you are for every act of kindness you choose today. The late summer sky over Cedar Valley, Montana, was a bruised gray, the kind of color that carried the promise of rain but offered only heat. Pine needles lay brittle along the road's edge, and the wind that rolled off the Bitterroot Mountains smelled of dust and distance. I trotted beside my human, Jack Carter, along the narrow service trail that paralleled Highway 89. My name is Ranger. I am a 5-year-old German shepherd, broad-shouldered, sable-coated, trained in search and rescue. My ears twitch at the faintest sound, my nose holds 1,000 stories, and tonight the air tasted wrong, sharp, metallic, and heavy with gasoline. Jack walked a few paces ahead, boots crunching gravel, scanning the tree line like the soldier he used to be. 35, tall and lean, his face carried the quiet hardness of a man who'd seen too much desert sun and too many funerals. A faded scar cut through the stubble along his jaw, and though he rarely spoke about his years overseas, his eyes sometimes went distant when the wind howled, like it was calling up ghosts. He'd left the Marines 5 years ago after a rescue mission went bad, costing him his best friend and the will to keep fighting other people's wars. Now he worked for the Forest Service, patrolling the wilderness with me at his side. We were tracking mule deer that evening for a wildlife survey when the first thread of smoke reached my nose. It wasn't wood smoke, it was acrid, chemical, alive with danger. I barked once, low and urgent. Jack stopped, sniffed the air, and frowned. "You smell that too, buddy?" he murmured. Another gust carried the scent stronger this time, fuel and burning plastic. I bounded toward the guardrail where the mountain dropped away in a steep ravine. Below us, through the branches, a faint flicker pulsed orange. "Jesus," Jack breathed, pushing through the brush. I stayed at his heel, muscles tense, the way he'd trained me. 20 yards down the slope lay a small Honda, flipped on its roof, one wheel still spinning like a dying heartbeat. Flames licked from the engine block, licking closer to the interior. I caught another smell, iron and salt. Blood. And beneath it, the fragile sweetness of a human's fear. A young woman was trapped halfway out of the shattered driver's side. Her body hung limp, tangled in the seatbelt she hadn't fully fastened. Her hair, a mess of auburn and ash, clung to her cheek in the heat. She was slender, maybe 20, pale skin smudged with soot. One arm twisted unnaturally against the gravel. I could hear the faint rasp of her breathing, uneven but still there. Jack slid down the slope on his hands and boots, ignoring the scrape of rock against his knuckles. "Hang on, miss," he called, voice steady but urgent. I followed, careful to plant my paws where the dirt held firm. The engine coughed and spat sparks as he reached her side. He checked her pulse, jaw tightening. "She's alive," he muttered. "Barely." He unzipped his pack, pulling out a small first aid kit, and tore the seatbelt free with his pocket knife. "Ranger, stay." But I didn't. I pressed against the girl's shoulder, pushing her away from the creeping fire line. Jack yanked off his field jacket, rolled it into a brace, and slid it under her neck to stabilize her spine. Her lips moved, a ghost of sound. Grandma. Rose. The words were thin as smoke. "Easy, kid," Jack said, glancing up toward the highway. No headlights, no traffic, only the distant rumble of thunder over the peaks. "We've got you." He grabbed his satellite phone, thumbed the power button. No signal. "Damn storm's killing the line." The fire hissed louder. Gasoline dripped in rhythmic plinks onto the hot manifold. I barked again, backing up, warning him. He knew that tone. "Right," he said, sliding an arm under the woman's knees. "We move now." I caught her sleeve gently in my teeth and helped lift as Jack pulled her free from the wreck. Every movement drew a small cry from her. He laid her on the slope a few yards away, wrapped her in a reflective emergency blanket. "Multiple fractures," he muttered to himself, checking her leg. "Possible concussion." The Honda's fuel line gave a final hiss. Jack shielded her body with his own, just as the car erupted in a roar of flame. The blast wave threw dirt and heat over us. Shards of glass pattered down like hail. I dropped low, covering the woman's side with my body until the air stilled. When the smoke cleared, the world smelled of burnt metal and pine resin. Jack coughed, eyes watering. That was too close. He brushed ash off my fur. "You okay, Ranger?" I wagged my tail once, affirmative. He looked at the girl again. "We can't stay here." He studied the darkening sky. Clouds stacked heavy and low, promising rain that might smother the fire, but drown us in cold. The nearest town was 15 miles north, too far to carry an unconscious woman through forest and storm. Then his gaze shifted down slope, toward the line of trees hiding an old ranger station, abandoned since the floods 5 years ago but still standing. "We'll take her there," he said. He slid his arms under the girl's shoulders, lifting her carefully onto his back. She was light but awkward, her limbs loose with pain. "Don't let me fall," she murmured, half dreaming. "You're safe," Jack answered. "Ranger and I got you." The climb was brutal. The trail was nothing but loose shale and roots, slick with the first drops of rain. Jack's breath came ragged, his knees trembling from the weight. I scouted ahead, testing the ground, barking softly when the footing was safe. Behind us, lightning forked across the sky, white and merciless. Thunder rolled like a cannon through the valley. By the time we reached the ridge, rain was pouring in sheets. Jack's shirt clung to his back, blood from his scraped arms washing down in pink rivulets. He shifted the girl higher, whispering encouragement though she was long past hearing. I led him through the last quarter mile until the dark shape of the ranger station emerged between the pines. A squat wooden cabin with boarded windows and a rusted roof. Jack shouldered the door open. The hinges screamed but held. Inside smelled of dust and wet wood, but it was shelter. He laid the girl on an old cot, draped her in dry blankets from the emergency chest, and checked her vitals again. "She's in shock," he said softly, "but she's breathing stronger now." I circled close, lying beside the cot. Her fingers twitched toward my fur, resting there lightly. I could feel her pulse, fragile but steadying. Jack crouched beside us, exhausted yet focused. "We'll wait out the storm, then get her to Valley Regional at first light," he said. Outside, thunder cracked again, and the rain hammered the roof so hard it sounded like applause. I rested my head on my paws, watching the firelight from the lantern dance across Jack's face. The same calm resolve that had carried us through every search, every rescue. But there was something different tonight. I saw it in his eyes when he looked at the girl, some quiet recognition of pain, of loss that mirrored his own. Her name, we'd learned from the burned ID in her wallet, was Sarah Morrison, a medical student from Cedar Valley, just 20, traveling alone to visit her grandmother after a stroke. A bright future suddenly dangling by a thread. Jack sighed. "You picked the wrong road to hurry, kid," he murmured. I shifted closer to Sarah, nose pressed to her wrist. Beneath the lingering scent of smoke and fear was something human and warm, a heartbeat refusing to surrender. I would guard that sound through the night. As the storm deepened, Jack sat by the doorway, radio in his lap, trying and failing to raise dispatch. Every few minutes he glanced at me, then at her, as though reminding himself she was real. I could hear the forest breathing beyond the walls, the groan of trees, the hiss of wind, and somewhere far off, the howl of a lone wolf answered the thunder. Jack looked up. "Let's hope he stays out there," he said. I wasn't so sure. The wilderness keeps its own secrets. And that night, the scent of smoke wasn't the only thing drifting on the wind. The wind came first, low and guttural, threading through the pines like a warning. Then came the rain. It didn't fall softly the way spring rain does. It struck like thrown gravel, hammering against the roof of the ranger station, soaking the forest into a single shivering mass of sound. I lay near the cot, ears pricked, the rhythm of Sarah's breathing guiding the beat of the night. Her pulse was weak but steady, her forehead burning with fever. Jack knelt beside her, the old lantern light carving deep lines into his face. His hair was damp, dark against his temples, and his hands, calloused, steady, moved with the precision of someone who had mended too many wounds in too many places. Jack had once been a combat medic. He never said it outright, but I knew from the way he handled pain. To him, suffering was an old companion, one that made him quiet rather than cold. He tore strips of clean cloth from his undershirt, dipped them in water, and wiped the soot from Sarah's face. The lantern flame caught the edge of her scar, a faint crescent near her eyebrow where glass had kissed her skin. Her hair, auburn and tangled, clung to her cheeks, and her lashes fluttered against her pale skin as if she were dreaming. She looked impossibly young, her narrow shoulders lost beneath the thermal blanket. "Dehydration's bad," Jack muttered to himself. "Shock, too. We need water." He looked toward me. "Ranger, you remember the stream from last season? Go." I barked once and slipped out into the rain. The forest was alive with stormlight, each bolt of lightning slicing through the darkness, illuminating trunks slick with water. My paws sank into the mud, the cold cutting through my pads. I followed the scent of wet stone and running water until I reached the stream. The current was swollen, furious from the sudden downpour, but I managed to drag Jack's empty canteen into the shallows and let it fill. When I returned, the cabin smelled of antiseptic and worry. Jack was cleaning a gash along Sarah's shin with rubbing alcohol, his movements gentle but relentless. He had splinted her broken leg with 2 strips of pine wood, tied with fabric torn from his jacket. She whimpered once when he tightened the knot, but didn't wake. "Good boy," Jack murmured as I dropped the canteen near his knee. He took a long breath, poured some water into a tin cup, and trickled it against her lips. Her throat moved weakly as she swallowed. Jack rummaged through his medical pouch and frowned. "No antibiotics left. Damn it." He glanced toward the window, where lightning briefly revealed the forest floor. "We'll have to improvise." He looked at me then, really looked. "Yarrow," he said softly, like speaking to himself. "We saw some near the ridge last week. Ranger, think you can find it?" I understood. My nose already knew the plant, sharp, earthy, with a hint of pepper when crushed. I darted back into the storm. The wind howled through the trees and water ran in rivulets down the slope. My senses cut through the chaos, following the faint green scent of wild yarrow. I found it near a cluster of fallen logs, slender stems topped with small white flowers bending under the rain. I bit carefully at the stems, pulling several before trotting back through the muck. By the time I returned, Jack had stripped off his soaked jacket and spread a blanket by the dying fire. He took the plants from my mouth and smiled tiredly. "You're earning that kibble, partner." He crushed the yarrow with the blunt end of his knife, making a paste that smelled bitter and alive, then gently applied it to Sarah's head wound. My old CO used to swear by this stuff, he muttered. Said it stopped the infection before the morphine could. Sarah stirred, her voice a whisper through cracked lips. Grandma Rose, I'm sorry. Jack froze for a second, watching her face. She's dreaming, he said quietly, though I could hear the tremor in his tone. You hold on, kid. You've got people waiting. The thunder rolled closer. The old ranger station creaked under the wind, its boards groaning like a ship at sea. Jack wrapped Sarah tighter in the blanket, then crouched beside me. If this rain keeps up, the road'll wash out. No rescue tonight. His eyes flicked toward the shadows near the window, where the forest pressed close. We keep her warm. That's all that matters now. He rummaged through his pack, found a silver emergency blanket, and laid it across her body. Her breathing slowed, the fever sweat cooling under the damp air. I curled beside her, pressing my body against her legs, sharing my heat. Jack fed the lantern another ounce of oil, its glow painting the walls in trembling gold. For a moment, it almost felt safe. But the world outside disagreed. The rain intensified, hammering the tin roof, turning the sound into a roar. Water began to seep through cracks in the floorboards, cold against my paws. I could smell it, the earth loosening, the river swelling. The storm wasn't just passing through, it was settling in. Jack moved toward the window, wiping away condensation with his sleeve. It's coming from the west, he said, half to himself. Electrical storm, probably lightning fires in the next valley by morning. He looked back at me. Stay sharp, Ranger. If this place floods, we move her higher. I nodded instinctively, tail low. My ears caught something beneath the rain, the faint snap of a branch outside, deliberate, not wind. I stiffened, eyes toward the door. Jack noticed instantly. His hand went to the revolver strapped to his thigh, the one he'd carried since the service. You smell something? I growled low. The scent was faint but human, male, sweat and wet leather, maybe 200 yards out. Jack's expression hardened. Could be a hunter sheltering from the storm, he whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. He crouched near the window again, peering into the darkness. Nothing but sheets of rain and lightning slicing across the horizon. The noise came again, closer this time. He clicked off the lantern, plunging us into shadow. For several minutes, only the storm moved. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise faded, swallowed by the sound of water. Jack exhaled slowly, lowering the gun. Probably an elk, he said, but his eyes lingered on the door longer than they needed to. He turned back to Sarah, checked her pulse again, and sat beside her cot. His exhaustion showed in the slump of his shoulders, but he kept his hand on her wrist, feeling for life. You did good out there, Ranger, he murmured. We'll get her through this. I promise. Outside, thunder retreated eastward, leaving behind a softer kind of silence, the drip of water, the whisper of the forest recovering from its beating. I stayed awake long after Jack's eyes closed, listening, guarding. The scent of the stranger still clung faintly to the wet air, just beyond the reach of the rain. Somewhere out there, something, or someone, was moving through the forest, and I knew the storm had only just begun. The morning came cold and gray, the kind of dawn that didn't belong to peace, but to the aftermath of storms. The air still smelled of wet earth and pine sap, the remnants of thunder echoing faintly over the mountains. I stretched near the door, my fur heavy with the dampness of the night. Jack sat by the cot where Sarah slept, his face drawn from exhaustion, but alert. He hadn't closed his eyes once. The fever had broken sometime before sunrise, and color had returned faintly to her cheeks. Her skin was still pale, but not ghostly anymore, and when she stirred, she whispered something about the light. Jack smiled softly, the kind of smile that didn't belong to him often. You made it through the night, he murmured. Outside, the forest began to wake. Ravens croaked, Branches groaned in the breeze, but something else came with the morning. My nose caught it first: gun oil, sweat, leather, and something sharp like anger. I stood instantly, ears up, a low growl building in my chest. Jack saw the change in me and went still. "Talk to me, Ranger. What is it?" I barked once, short and hard, facing the window. He moved to the edge of the door, his hand already reaching for the revolver on his thigh. "Stay with Sarah." Then the crunch of boots. 3 men. Their silhouettes broke through the mist like shadows that knew their purpose. The first was tall, broad, wearing a camo jacket that had seen better years. His hair was silver at the temples, his face weathered, but stern. The look of someone who commanded more than he asked. 2 others followed, younger, rougher, the smell of cigarettes and wet wool clinging to them. "Forest Service?" Jack called, keeping his tone even. The tall man stepped forward, rifle slung casually but ready. "No," he said, voice deep and firm. "Private search party. We tracked something last night. A large canine dragging human scent through the storm." His eyes flicked to me, then to the interior of the cabin. "Looks like we found it. Step aside, sir." Jack didn't move. "She's hurt," he said, nodding toward Sarah. "We're waiting for rescue." The man's gaze hardened. "You have a radio?" "Not one that works in this storm." The stranger shifted his rifle. "Then, I'll make this easy. Step away from the animal." That's when I realized it. His voice carried authority, not just command but guilt, like a man used to giving orders that cost lives. Jack's jaw clenched. "This isn't a wild animal. This is my dog." The man's expression changed almost imperceptibly. A flicker of disbelief, then something else. Recognition. His voice lowered. "Your dog? German shepherds don't survive this deep in the range without training. Where did you find him?" Jack's answer came calm but ironed. "Same place I found the girl, at a wreck down the slope." The stranger took one more step. "The girl's name?" "Sarah Morrison." The reaction was immediate. The man's body stiffened, rifle lowering an inch. Behind him, the younger men exchanged glances, uncertain. He whispered the name once, almost reverently. "Sarah." His eyes shifted past Jack, landing on her as she stirred weakly on the cot. "Who are you?" Jack demanded. The man swallowed hard, his voice barely steady. "Marcus Reed," he said. "I run the Ridgewood Logging Company. And that girl, she's my daughter." Jack's brows furrowed. "Your daughter's been lying in a ditch for a day, and you're out here hunting wolves instead of calling for help?" The 2 men behind Marcus bristled, hands twitching near their weapons, but Marcus lifted a hand to silence them. His face was pale now, stripped of the authority it wore like armor. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I thought she was dead. The sheriff called me last night. They found her car burned out. Blood, wolf tracks. I thought—" His voice broke slightly. "I thought the same thing that took my son had taken her too." Jack's expression softened for half a second. "You mean Daniel?" Marcus froze, eyes sharp. "How do you know that name?" "She mentioned it in her fever, said something about a brother." For a moment, silence filled the room except for the soft hum of rain dripping from the eaves. Then Marcus exhaled heavily. "Daniel was 10. 15 years ago, he was attacked by wolves near our property. I buried him myself. Since then, I made sure no pack ever came near these woods again." The scent of his anger filled the air, old rage, bitter, tangled with sorrow. But beneath it, I smelled something else. Faint, but true. Guilt. Jack must have sensed it too because his tone changed. "You sure he was attacked?" Marcus turned sharply. "I saw the scene." "Or what you wanted to see," Jack shot back. "You've been killing wolves ever since, haven't you?" Marcus's jaw tightened, the skin near his eyes twitching. You weren't there. No, Jack said, his voice steady but cutting. But I've seen enough men run from their ghosts to know when one's chasing you. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he lowered the rifle completely. It was my land, he said after a long pause. My company. We were cutting beyond the legal boundary, pushing the packs out. The wolves were starving, desperate. Daniel wandered off near one of the clearings. He fell, 30 feet into a ravine. When I found him, he was already gone. There were wolves nearby, watching. They never touched him, but I couldn't face the truth. Couldn't face the men I'd bribed, the laws I'd broken. His voice cracked. So I made them monsters instead. The younger hunters shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a stocky man with freckles and kind eyes, lowered his weapon entirely. The other, nervous, barely 30, glanced toward Marcus, uncertain whether to follow. Sir, the stocky one said softly. What about the girl? She needs help. Marcus nodded slowly, the fight leaving him. She's my daughter, he whispered again, more to himself than anyone else. He stepped inside, kneeling beside the cot. His gloved hand hovered just above Sarah's cheek, trembling. She looks like her mother, he said, voice breaking. Sarah stirred at his voice, eyes fluttering open. Confusion clouded her expression, then fear. Jack? She murmured. Who's that? Jack knelt beside her, calm and steady. Someone who owes you more than an apology. Marcus's lips parted, but no words came. He simply stared, lost somewhere between disbelief and regret. Finally, he looked at Jack. She needs a hospital. Jack nodded. There's a clearing 3 miles north, enough space for a chopper. Marcus turned to his men. Radio it in. Medical evac for 3, now. They obeyed instantly, their earlier bravado replaced with quiet professionalism. The radio crackled to life, the voice of a dispatcher answering through static. Marcus stood, facing Jack once more. You don't have to trust me, he said, but I can still fix this. Jack's eyes narrowed, but softened slightly. Then start by keeping your gun down. For the first time since he arrived, Marcus managed a faint, exhausted nod. He looked toward me then, the dog he'd mistaken for a threat. There was something almost reverent in his gaze. If you hadn't found her, he began, then stopped. Thank you. I didn't understand the words, but I knew the tone. It was the sound of a man seeing the cost of his hatred for the first time. Outside, the rain began to lighten, but the air felt heavier than before. Somewhere in the distance, I could already hear the whir of helicopter blades fighting through the valley wind. Marcus looked out toward the sky and whispered, almost to the storm itself. No more lies. The thudding blades of the helicopter beat against the thinning storm clouds as it descended toward a muddy clearing carved from the forest. The wind tore through the trees, bending the soaked branches, scattering needles and rain into our faces. I lay strapped on a stretcher beside Sarah, my fur matted with blood and ash. My lungs burned with every breath, and the world swayed in and out of focus. Jack knelt between us, one hand steady on my flank, the other gripping the gurney rail near Sarah's head. His face was a mask of determination streaked with exhaustion. Beneath the streaks of grime, his eyes glinted with something deeper than duty, fear that he was about to lose more than he could save. Marcus stood near the landing zone, barking orders into the radio with a voice that had once commanded boardrooms and work crews, but now trembled with desperation. The silver in his hair caught the weak light, and for the first time, he looked less like a man of power and more like a man stripped of it. His guilt clung to him like the mist rising from the wet earth. When the helicopter touched down, he turned toward Jack. You go first, he shouted over the roar. She needs the ER and the dog. Whatever help he needs, it's on me. Jack didn't reply, only nodded and helped lift Sarah's stretcher inside. I was loaded next to her, As the doors sealed shut, the world shrank to the hum of the engine and the pounding of hearts. Sarah's hand twitched toward me, fingers brushing my paw. Her lips parted, voice hoarse and small. "Pack stays together," she whispered, eyes half-lidded. Jack smiled faintly. "That's right, kid," he said. "Nobody gets left behind." The flight to the city hospital cut through clouds, still swollen with rain. The lights of Cedar Valley spread below, soft golds and whites, flickering like tiny fires against the black earth. I drifted in and out of consciousness, feeling the warmth of Sarah's hand near mine, the vibration of the helicopter, the hum of Jack's heartbeat somewhere above my head. When the doors finally opened, the smell changed. Sterile air, disinfectant, the human scent of fear and hope intertwined. The medical team rushed forward, separating us swiftly. Sarah was wheeled one way toward the emergency ward, and I another, toward the veterinary wing. Jack moved between both paths, like a restless current, refusing to settle. At the ER entrance, a nurse stepped into the chaos. She was in her early 50s, dark hair streaked with silver, eyes kind yet commanding, the kind of woman who had spent decades holding life and death in her hands. "Name's Dr. Evelyn Harper," she said crisply. "Head of emergency. You the one who brought her in?" Jack nodded. "I'm Jack Carter. She's Sarah Morrison. Head trauma, compound leg fracture, dehydration. We'll take it from here," Dr. Harper said, her tone firm but warm. Then she paused, her gaze flicking to the stretcher where I lay across the hall. "And that's the dog who dragged her out of the wreck?" Jack nodded again. "He's got internal bleeding. He saved her." "Then we'll save him too," she said simply before signaling her team to move faster. Marcus arrived moments later, his tailored coat soaked, his expensive shoes ruined by the mud. He looked lost amid the white walls and antiseptic brightness. When Dr. Harper approached him for patient consent, his voice broke. "Anything they need," he said. "Every expense. Just save them." He caught sight of Jack standing near the partition glass, still spattered with blood that wasn't his. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Marcus stepped closer. "You should hate me," he said quietly. "But I owe you everything." Jack's reply was steady, his voice low. "You don't owe me. You owe them the truth." Marcus's gaze fell to the tiled floor. "I intend to give it. To the authorities. To everyone. My lawyers will hate me for it, but I'm done lying." Hours passed under harsh fluorescent light. I was dimly aware of the steady beep of monitors, of soft human voices giving orders. My world had narrowed to pain and smell, metal, gauze, antiseptic. A vet surgeon with gentle hands worked on me, her name tag reading Dr. Lana Pierce, mid-40s, blonde hair tied under a cap, eyes calm behind clear glasses. She spoke softly as she worked. "Easy, boy. You've done enough saving for one lifetime." Her touch reminded me of Sarah's hand through my fur, warm, grateful, trusting. Meanwhile, Sarah's surgery stretched through the night. Jack waited between both units, pacing the corridor lined with vending machines and flickering lights. He sat only when exhaustion forced him to, but his mind never stilled. I could sense his worry, his guilt, the memory of men he couldn't save in another life replaying behind his eyes. Marcus sat opposite him, still in his muddy coat, head bowed, elbows on knees, two men bound by a stranger's survival. At dawn, Dr. Harper stepped into the hallway. The fatigue in her expression was offset by relief. "She's stable," she said. Jack exhaled deeply, sinking back into the chair. Marcus closed his eyes, his shoulders shaking once, silently. "You can see her soon," the doctor added. Across the hall, Dr. Pierce emerged from the veterinary wing. "Your dog's a fighter," she told Jack. "We had to transfuse and close 3 wounds. He almost didn't make it. But his heart," she smiled, "stronger than most people I've met." Jack chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. That's Ranger. When Sarah woke, the world was filtered light and quiet machines. Her hair, now clean and brushed, lay across the pillow like threads of copper. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, confusion fading to relief as she saw Jack by her bed. "Where's Ranger?" she asked, her voice thin but clear. Jack pointed through the glass panel toward the other wing. "I was lying on a padded mat, chest rising gently beneath the tubes." Sarah's lips curved weakly. "He's still here," she murmured. "He always is." Minutes later, Marcus entered the room hesitantly, his face pale under the hospital lights. His hand trembled as he gripped the doorframe. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw him. "You're—" she began, but her voice failed. He took a step forward, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything, for the years you grew up thinking you were unwanted, for what I became after Daniel died. I can't undo it, but I can change what comes next." For a long time, no one spoke. Then Sarah reached for his hand, her eyes glistening. "You can start by telling the truth." Marcus nodded, tears streaking through the grime on his face. "I already have. I turned myself in this morning. The police are coming for a statement. The land I destroyed, it'll be made right. I've already signed over 5,000 acres to conservation. It's the least I can do." Jack stood quietly near the foot of the bed, watching the moment unfold. When Marcus turned to him, Jack stepped forward and placed a firm hand on the older man's shoulder. "The truth," he said, voice steady, "starts today." Sarah squeezed my paw gently when Jack brought her to see me later that afternoon. Her skin was warm, her smile soft but strong. "Pack stays together," she whispered again. I blinked slowly in answer, the rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with mine, steady and alive. Outside the hospital windows, the storm had passed, leaving the mountains washed clean under a pale sun. For the first time in days, the air smelled not of smoke or blood, but of lavender drifting faintly from the corridor where an old woman approached in a wheelchair, her silver hair shining like mercy. Rose Morrison, 78, frail yet fierce, eyes bright as polished glass, rolled into the room, tears spilling freely. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "I knew you were still breathing, my girl." The room filled with the scent of her perfume and something softer, faith fulfilled. Sarah wept into her grandmother's arms, and even Marcus stepped back, humbled by grace he didn't deserve. I closed my eyes then, resting against the warmth of the blanket, listening to their voices blend into one, the family that had been broken, finding its way back together. And for the first time since the fire, the world felt safe again. 2 months passed, and the mountains of Cedar Valley changed their skin once more. The last of the snowmelt fed the rivers, and the forest shimmered in shades of green so vivid it felt like the land itself was exhaling after holding its breath through pain. From my spot under the spruce trees, I could see everything: the wooden cabins, the chain-free enclosures, the volunteers walking with rescued wolves along winding trails. It was a place built not from wealth or guilt, but from something far stronger: atonement. They called it the Cedar Valley Wolf Sanctuary, though to me it was simply home. Sarah stood by the fence line, clipboard in hand, her auburn hair tied back in a loose braid that caught the sun like fire. She had filled out in strength since the accident. Her once fragile frame now carried the quiet resilience of someone who'd been broken and rebuilt. The faint scar on her brow was the only trace left from that night, a silver crescent she wore like a badge. She'd deferred her admission to Johns Hopkins for a year, trading hospital halls for open sky. Her days were spent feeding pups, logging data, and teaching volunteers that wolves were not beasts to be feared, but souls with memory and loyalty. Sometimes, when she knelt to check my bandaged side, she'd smile and whisper, "You're the reason I stayed." Jack Carter, now officially appointed as Chief of Wildlife Response and Safety, carried himself like a man who had finally made peace with the ghosts of his past. His uniform wasn't military anymore, khaki shirt rolled at the sleeves, utility vest, boots worn but polished. The scar along his jawline caught the light when he smiled, something he did more often now. He trained the younger volunteers with patience, born from experience. "Out here," he'd say, kneeling to show a trainee how to check a wolf's paw. "Every life counts, fur, feather, or human. You treat pain with respect, not fear." They listened, not just because he was a veteran, but because his calm demanded it. Every morning, Jack would stop by my enclosure with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a tennis ball in the other. "Ready, partner?" he'd ask. I'd wag my tail once. Our ritual. We'd play fetch by the waterfall where I had my own small section of forest fenced with open gates. The sound of crashing water and laughter, human and canine, blended into something I'd never known before: belonging. Across the sanctuary grounds, Marcus Reed moved differently now. The once powerful businessman, always crisp in his tailored suits, now wore plain flannel shirts rolled to the elbows, his hands roughened by labor. The court had granted him probation and community service, taking into account his confession and the 5,000 acres he had donated to the sanctuary's establishment. Some called it mercy. Jack called it accountability. Each morning, Marcus joined the crew clearing storm debris or rebuilding old cabins. Sweat streaked through his gray hair, but he never complained. He spoke little, except when talking to Sarah. Their conversations were slow, cautious things, like two people learning to speak a forgotten language. He'd hand her tools, she'd thank him quietly, and sometimes he'd linger just long enough to ask about her work. The pain between them didn't vanish. It softened, reshaped into something they could build upon. One afternoon, as I lay nearby, I overheard him murmur, "Your mother would have been proud of what you're doing." Sarah didn't reply at first. Then she said, "Maybe you can tell me about her someday." Marcus smiled faintly, his voice rough. "I'd like that." At the heart of the sanctuary stood a new wooden structure, a small cabin built from reclaimed timber. It wasn't grand, but its windows opened toward the valley where the wolves roamed free. Rose Morrison, 78 but sharp as the wind, had moved into it after her doctors cleared her travel. She spent her afternoons on the porch, wrapped in a knitted shawl, a basket of yarn by her side. The scent of lavender and pine clung to her like memory. She would hum old hymns as she watched me and the younger wolves play, her eyes shining with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had waited a lifetime to see the world made right. "You keep them safe, Ranger," she'd call out. I'd bark once in reply, tail wagging. The sanctuary's opening day drew a small crowd: locals, journalists, and a few state officials. The ribbon was simple, the speeches short. Jack spoke first, his voice carrying steady through the clearing. "We built this place not to erase the past, but to learn from it," he said. "For too long, fear decided what deserved to live. From now on, compassion will." Sarah followed, her voice softer, but no less firm. "This is not just a sanctuary for wolves. It's for all of us who needed to start over." Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd, head bowed, listening. Later that evening, after the visitors had left, the light turned gold through the trees. Sarah sat beside me near the waterfall, sketchbook on her knees. "You know," she said, "I used to think home was a place you were born into, but maybe it's something you build with the ones who stay." I tilted my head, catching her scent: soap, grass, and faint lavender from Rose's hands on her clothes. "Pack stays together," I barked softly. She laughed, her eyes bright with tears. "Yeah," she said, "always." Jack joined us then, a mug of coffee in hand, his shirt damp with sweat from the day's work. He tossed a pebble into the pool, watching the ripples spread. "Funny," he said quietly. "I spent years thinking my duty ended when the war did. Turns out, this is the first fight that ever felt worth it." Sarah nudged his shoulder. "You built something that saves lives, Jack. That's more than most people ever do." Marcus approached from behind, slower than before, holding a small wooden plaque. He knelt by the stone near the water's edge, where he'd carved 2 words into the grain. Daniel's Promise. He placed it in the soil and said, "For every creature we once feared, for every truth we buried." His voice cracked but didn't falter. Jack placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and wordless. Night came softly, draping the valley in silver light. The wolves howled, their voices echoing across the ridges, a sound not of warning, but of unity. I lifted my muzzle to join them. Behind me, Sarah rested her head against Jack's arm, and Rose's cabin glowed faintly through the trees. Marcus stood near the fence, gazing into the distance with something close to peace. I closed my eyes and listened to the chorus that rose into the night. Family, forgiveness, freedom. It all sounded the same now. Because in this place, every scar had a story, and every story had found its home. And me, I was no longer just a rescue dog. I was a witness. I was the proof that sometimes, the family you find after the storm is stronger than the one you lose before it. Because home isn't just where you're loved, it's where you choose to stay. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. They come quietly, in the shape of a loyal dog, a second chance, or a heart learning to forgive. What happened in Cedar Valley wasn't just the rescue of a girl, a man, and a dog. It was the rescue of faith itself. Because when everything seemed lost, something greater than us was still at work. Perhaps it was God's hand guiding Ranger through the storm. Perhaps it was His mercy that turned guilt into redemption and strangers into family. We may never see the miracles we pray for in the way we expect, but they are there, in kindness, in courage, in the simple choice to love again after being hurt. And maybe that's what faith really means. Not waiting for the heavens to open, but opening our own hearts instead. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone who once stood by you when life was hardest, share it. Leave a comment about the miracle you've witnessed in your life. Subscribe and join us as we continue to tell stories that remind the world that love, loyalty, and faith still exist. May God bless you, guide you through your own storms, and fill your days with the quiet miracles that change everything, just as He did for Sarah, Jack, Marcus, Rose, and Ranger. Because in the end, we don't just find miracles, we become them.